So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This afternoon I want to talk about the Hensel glass negatives, which are an amazing historic collection of images of this region. And so I want to begin by talking a little bit about Louis Hensel, his history, his place in the community, and the work that he did. Then I want to talk a little bit about the Marshall collection that is such an important collection of images and records of the region here. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about the exhibit that we have up this year and what our plans are for the future. So Louis Hensel was born in New York City on January 29th, 1849. He spent his early years on Long Island and in Williamsburg in Brooklyn in New York. And his formative years, really, they moved to Long Island when he was age 2, and then grew up in his early years on Long Island and then in Williamsburg. When he was 17, he moved to Port Jervis and began to learn the trade of photography. One of his early successes were photographs that he took of the ice gorge in the Delaware River after a winter storm. And those were so popular and so successful that's what really convinced him to embark on a career of photographing the landscape, the major buildings and structures, and the people throughout Northeast Pennsylvania. On June 16th, 1875, he married Teresa Nagel of New York City, and they had 2 sons, Gustav of Scranton and Louis C., who lived both in Chicago and later in New York City. And this is a photograph taken in Hensel's studio in Hawley of the Hensel family. So you have Louis Hensel and Teresa Hensel in the front, and their 2 sons, Gustav and Louis C., in the back. It's just a great image of the family. Great example of the portraiture work that Louis Hensel did as well. Originally, Hensel started out with a small portable gallery in Hawley, and he operated with that as his base of operations from 1878 until 1882. If you actually look at the 1880 census, he's still listed as living near Matamoros, which would have been very close to Port Jervis at the time. In 1882, his business was successful enough that he was able to build a larger, more permanent studio in Hawley, and that really became the center of his business for the next 40 years. Unfortunately, his first studio was destroyed by fire in July of 1887, and I think that's why it's been so difficult to find glass negatives from the very early years. So most of the ones that have survived tend to be later, but unfortunately, we think a lot of the original ones were destroyed by fire. So when we're looking at the earlier images, we tend to have to look at stereopticon views or postcard views as well, or other printed images that have survived. But Hensel rebuilt his studio, reopened it in November of 1887, and then literally operated the business for there based in Hawley for the next 40 years. Hensel was also very civic-minded. So along with Daniel Bingham, he organized the first Hawley Fire Company. There's actually a great Hensel photograph of the fire company that I think we have hanging over in the factory office building. He also served as the president of the Hawley Council for 9 years, and he was one of the first members of the Hawley Chamber of Commerce. So very active in terms of civic duties in the town of Hawley. And then finally, Hensel died on November 29th, 1927, after a long and illustrious career in the region. This is an image of the original Hensel building. So again, we don't have a glass negative of this and it would really be nice to find a little higher quality image. This one doesn't scan and reproduce too well, but it's just a great image of the original studio building. You can see images, hanging framed images in the windows of the building. And what I really like is the model of one of the large box frame cameras that Hensel used on the roof of the building. And so this is where the original studio was located, and it was the location for the rebuilt studio as well. And it's where the trading post in Hawley is today. But I'm still on the hunt for a little better image of this because it's such an interesting and neat photograph. It'll also be nice to see a little closer, better view of the people themselves. I'm going to show you 3 stereopticon views, and they're interesting both for the images, but they're also really interesting for the labels that are on the back of them as well. So this is Main Street in Honesdale. This would be the area where the banks are located today. And so nice, interesting view of Honesdale. All 3 of these images are from the late 1870s. Now, if you look at the back, it has stereoptic views of Honesdale, Pennsylvania, L. Hensel, Port Jervis, New York. So 1870s, late 1870s, still branding his business with in Port Jervis. Another view of the High Works, the Gravity Railroad in Hawley, and so nice view of Hawley and the Gravity Railroad. And this is an early one as well. This one just has the handwritten description on the back of Hawley, Pennsylvania, seen from the High Works. And this third one also, you can see the Gravity Railroad for the Pennsylvania Coal Company and in the background as well. This one's very interesting on the label on the back because you still have the Port Jervis label, but it's a little difficult to see. But what you have right here is a stamp on the label that says Louis Hensel, photographer. Now it says Hawley, Pennsylvania. So by this point, yeah, he's transitioning over. He still may have been using some of those old labels for a period of time as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the Marshall collection of Hensel glass negatives. So James Marshall donated his collection of the Hensel glass negatives to the Hawley Library in 1991. There are more than 3,000 of the glass photographic negatives, and there are other materials as well. The Marshall's purpose in making this gift to the Hawley Library was to make sure that this material was preserved, given its important historic nature, and also that it would be made available to researchers and to members of the public. Many of you probably knew Ken Sproson, who was a great volunteer at the Hawley Library and really took ownership and responsibility for the Marshall collection. Many of the early images that we have used here in the museum over the past decade were items that Ken had printed for us of images of White Mills and the Dorflinger factory buildings as well. So you could literally go into the Hawley Library, look through the notebooks of Xerox copies of all of the images, select the ones you wanted, submit a form, and then Ken would print them for you. It was a great resource to the community. Ken was also a great custodian of the collection as well. Most all of the glass negatives were conserved. They were put in conservation envelopes, carefully and safely stored as well. So we owe a debt of gratitude not only to the Hawley Library, but also to Ken for the work that he did with the Hensel negatives in preserving this important collection. Last year, we became the custodians of the collection under a long-term lease agreement with the Hawley Library. So the Hawley Library remains the owners of the collection, and we have a lease agreement that is renewable with the mutual agreement of both parties as we go forward. Our objective is to continue the responsibilities that the Hawley Library has had for this collection. So first and foremost, preserving the original material, making sure that it is properly cared for and secured and conserved. And then the second element is also making sure that this really important resource on the history of the region is made available to people who are doing research work, scholars, and also to members of the public. So continuing on with some of the work that Ken did on behalf of the Hawley Library for so many years. Our plan has been to produce high-resolution digital scans of the collection and then to make those available to scholars and also to members of the public. And if we're successful in doing that, we have something that's very easy to give to people who are interested in studying the history of the region. They get a nice digital file that's easy to provide to them. And at the same time, it means that we can make sure that we're caring for and protecting that original material that can be a little bit fragile and subject to damage. The Hawley Library, its board, Amanda's here, and Marianne's here as well. Several of the members of the Hawley Library Board have been terrific partners in this project, and we look forward to many years of working together with them to make sure that this material gets available and shared with people in the region who are interested in learning about our history, and also in people who are researching and doing more scholarly work on the region as well. Our current exhibit, which I'll talk about in just a couple of minutes, is the first step in this project. And what we wanted to do with the exhibit that we now have up, first and foremost, was to prove out the scanning process. So we wanted to make sure that we had the technology and we had people who could generate very high quality digital scans and to do it on a pace where we could actually, over a period of years, end up with a good library of digital scans of all of the Hensel material. So that was the first objective. I encourage you, when I'm done talking, to spend some more time with the images. I think you'll agree with me that the digital scanning process has worked really, really well. You get amazing clarity in these images and everything that I think we had hoped we would be able to achieve. And I do want to recognize a number of people who really were instrumental in making this happen. One person who's not here, Grant Genslinger, who I think is still hiking in Scotland. Grant, I think, was instrumental first in the initial Marshall gift to the Hawley Library in 1991, and he was really pivotal in the process to bring the Marshall collection here as well. I've already mentioned the members of the board of the Hawley Library. Again, they've been terrific partners in this effort. We approached Bob Lisa of Lisa Studios in Tunkhannock to discuss the scanning. Now, Bob had been doing scanning for us for many, many years. He did the big wall-size image upstairs of the top floor of the cutting room from one of the Hensel images for us many years ago. And he has the capabilities. He does work for major museums all around the world. And so we knew he had the right capabilities, and we knew he also had the right equipment to at least start the project. But what Bob did for us that was really remarkable is he's designed new equipment specifically tailored to being able to do this work. And the new equipment allows the scanning process to take place more efficiently and more rapidly, and with even better results. So I asked Bob, I said, is anybody else doing this kind of work? And he said, not really, nowhere else. And in fact, the manufacturers of the equipment he's using have really been on him to find out what he's doing with the equipment he's developed, how he's doing it. Hasselblad, he's using the state-of-the-art brand new camera that Hasselblad just came out with to do this work, and it's the results, I think you'll agree, are really, really remarkable. So we owe great debt of gratitude to Bob. We now know the technology works, and we now know that it can be scaled to the point where we can begin to ramp up the scanning effort to really start to work away at the large body of work that exists in this collection. Bob also very generously donated the large mural that you see on the wall in the back as part of the exhibit of the panoramic view of White Mills, and that mural will become a permanent part of the museum here. And then Juan Espino. Juan and I talked about this exhibit, what we wanted to achieve, and Juan's advice to me was, we want to make sure this was done right and it really looks well. And Juan spent hours doing all of the framing work for the exhibit. And again, I think you'll agree that it really looks stunning, and it's the way that this material should be treated and should be exhibited and displayed. And then finally, Joe Savage in Lancaster was one of our early funders. So he funded most of the first round of digital scanning that we have done. We've also lined up additional commitments from Joe, from Marilyn Costo, one of my board members here. And so we really have at least the next round in place, and we're going to start that as we move into the later fall months and on into next year. And I think we did about 40 images this year in terms of scanning. I'd like to do at least 3 times that many next year, and then eventually ramping this up to where we can begin to scan literally several hundred of these images each year as we go forward. But we're very grateful for the support that we've received from the Hawley Library and from all of the individuals that I just mentioned here. Okay, now I want to turn to the images that are in the current exhibit. So as we thought about what we wanted to do this year, we decided to focus on images of White Mills, and of the Dorflinger factory and of the workers in White Mills. And there's a wonderful group of these images in the Marshall collection. So we had the right material to begin with, and we thought this had a really nice tie-in to the museum as well. So this was our first effort, and this is that panoramic view of the village of White Mills. This photo would have been taken in the 1906 to 1910 timeframe. We can tell that based upon the development of the factory buildings and also a few of the houses, because we know when some of those disappeared, so we can time exact pretty closely when this image was done. I think this is one of Hensel's masterpieces. It just gives you a wonderful view of White Mills as you're coming from Cherry Ridge. It shows the Dorflinger factory complex in the center and the surrounding industrial village. And at this time period, this was really about the peak of Dorflinger's operations in White Mills. So you really get a strong sense for how the Industrial Revolution worked and how these industrial villages were built and were operated. So it's just a wonderful image. There are an awful lot of things in here. We've had a lot of people from White Mills looking to find their houses and where they are, where they were. It's just a great image. And the big scan on the wall just gives you amazing detail and clarity. And we see things in this image now that we hadn't seen before. This image looks at the Dorflinger factory in the village of White Mills with the Lackawaxen River in the foreground here. So you're looking across the river here toward the factory and then on up the hill. The two large buildings in the front, there and there, are the lower blowing shops where the glass blanks were blown. The blowing shop on the right was built in 1902, that one right there. And the tall chimney on the right was for a coal gasification plant that was added to the blowing shop in 1905. So this image, again, about the same time period as the panoramic view in that 1906 to 1910 timeframe. And this image was taken near the corner of what is now Route 6 and Charles Street. So again, the large building on the right is the last blowing shop built in the factory that was added in 1902. And the tall chimney, again, was for the coal gasification plant. So the coal gasification plant, Dorflinger brought bituminous coal from western Pennsylvania all the way across the state, and the gasification plant converted that coal to natural gas. Natural gas was great for that last blowing shop. It burned hotter, it burned cleaner, and it was more consistent than the anthracite coal that was used in the two earlier blowing shops. So it was the last real innovation at the factory, and that blowing shop was the last major addition to the factory that was made. I think one of the really endearing elements of this photograph is the children walking on Main Street right here and here, and it adds a nice element of local life in the village of White Mills. And again, same time period, we're in that 1906 to 1910 time period. Now, this is the only image in our exhibit that is not a Hensel image. So this was taken by Jay Bodie, a Honesdale photographer. We haven't found a Hensel image of the fire that took place at the Dorflinger factory in 1892. So we have a few fire pictures, but none of them, we haven't found a Hensel one as yet. So this shows the results of the fire that occurred on May 26, 1892. Most of the Dorflinger factory buildings were severely damaged or destroyed. In the foreground on the right, you can see the furnaces and the chimneys for the upper blowing shop. This building here in the center with no roof is the building we're in right now. And the lower blowing shop, which was attached to the front of this building, is right there. You can see the factory office building. The windows were broken in that building, but fortunately the rest of that building was spared, as was the building where they made the clay pots. But significant damage to the building. Dorflinger completely rebuilt the factory. The blowing shop down front was back in operation in a week. The cutting shop was rebuilt and back in operation in a couple of months. This is the factory office building, built in about 1888. The company's bookkeepers worked here on the first floor of the building. And that's where the Dorflinger workers were paid. And the second floor was the White Mills showroom. The man on the right, on the steps right there, is John C. Dorflinger. And John was the last foreman of the cutting department before the factory closed in 1921. And probably equally importantly, John operated the very first Dorflinger glass museum and shop in his father's general store from 1926 until his death in 1964. So John is one of those people in the community who carried on and preserved and protected much of the legacy of the Dorflinger Company's operations. Here is a little earlier view of the factory office building with the cutting department in the front of the building and the bookkeepers up on the porch. So I've counted all these guys. There are like 80 men and boys in this photograph. They would have constituted the cutting department, and there are about 7 or 8 of the bookkeepers up on the porch. This photograph, we actually have a copy that is a printed copy that was dated 1898, so we know when this photograph was taken as well. This photograph is one of my favorites in the group. It shows the engraving department at the Dorflinger factory. Note the young man seated in the middle. It looks to me like he is about 13 years old. Now, and 12, it could be 12 as well. Yeah. Typically, you would start your apprenticeship when you were 10 years old. and you would finish your apprenticeship 15, 16, 17. So when Amanda brings the school groups through the fourth graders, one of the things we can point out to them was right about now you'd be starting to work in the factory. So yeah, so this is just a great image to show just how an apprentice would work with a couple of more senior members of the team. This image is this room. So this was the middle floor of the cutting shop. This shows roughing. That's the first stage in the glass cutting process, and that's what took place in this room. The rougher cut the basic outline of the design on the glass using the large iron wheels you see in the photograph here, here, down here as well. And then the large funnels here and here and here, you see would hold a mixture of sand or carborundum and water. And the wheels provided the pressure, but it was really the wet abrasive mixture that did most of the cutting process. So the job of these workers was to cut the basic outline of the pattern to get it ready for the finer cutting work that would be done upstairs. And this is an image of the top floor of this building where the smoothing and the polishing would be done. So the smoothing process, the smoother would go over the rough cuts made by the roughers, smooth out all the rough edges, and then go back and fill in all the fine details in the design. And then the polisher would use wooden, brush, and felt wheels and polishing compounds to buff the surface of the glass to give it that final brilliant shine that was so characteristic of the work being made at this time period. Now, polishing was kind of a messy, wet business. So if you look at the cutters and you see the cutting frames with these splash boards up in the vertical position, they were polishing. Well, the guys that have the splash boards that are missing or down would have been the ones doing the smoothing. This is a broader view of one of the washing and packing rooms in the factory, and it shows the steps to wash the glass, to prepare an inventory of the individual pieces, and then to pack the glass in Excelsior to get it ready for shipping to market. Excelsior was curved wood shavings used to pack the glass in wooden barrels to prevent damage to the glass during shipment. So they were really kind of the early 20th century version of styrofoam peanuts, what we would use today. Yeah. And you can see that photography inside was a little bit of a tricky business. So you're going to have to leave the exposure open for a longer period of time than the outdoor work. And so you would often catch movement. You can see several examples here of the workers who were moving at the time that the photograph was taken. You end up with a little bit of a blurred image. Now here is a closer up view of the back corner of that same room. Again, these 5 women followed direction really well. They stayed very still for the photograph. So you have a really nice clear image here. And again, they're washing the glass. You can see one of the wooden barrels right there for packing the glass in Excelsior. So they would dry the glass in sawdust, brush it off, wrap it in paper, and then pack it in the Excelsior in the wooden barrels. And then the glass would be shipped either down the canal or on the railroad down to the New York market, where Dorflinger operated both wholesale and retail stores. I also think one of the charming features of this photograph are these fashion posters that the workers have put up to, again, brighten up their workspace a little bit. This image shows St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church. St. Joseph's was built in 1878, and it was one of the oldest churches in the Scranton Diocese, and it was also a Wayne County landmark for more than 80 years. St. Joseph's was destroyed by fire on December 21st, 1960, but this is just a great image of the church. Not surprisingly, located on Church Street. Here's the White Mills baseball field. Again, an image that would be in those early 1900 years. The photograph shows a game being played by the White Mills Crescents on their home field just across the Lackawaxen River, where the sports field still exists today. Note the many spectators watching the game that you have out here. So the men are all wearing suits. The ladies are all in white dresses. This was probably a Sunday afternoon game after church. The bleachers on the right, the high-priced seats right there, have some of the spectators that are sheltered a little bit, and then up on the bridge you actually have other spectators sitting in their carriages watching the game. And then you have the village of White Mills in the background. You can see the factory office building there, and the factory, one of the blowing shops there as well. There's the back of the Methodist church right there. This is one of the hotels in White Mills. Originally, this hotel was built by Charles Dobelman in 1896, and it was named the Lafayette Hotel. Charles Dobelman's brother was a partner or a part owner of one of Christian Dorflinger's Brooklyn glass factories. The hotel was located right between the White Mills train depot, right about over here, and the baseball field right over here as well. W.P. Jacobs was proprietor of the hotel after the name was changed to the Hotel Frederick, and you see the name Hotel Frederick here in this image. Later on, a later proprietor of the hotel, Frederick, was C.H. Murphy, and he was the father of the famous baseball player Eddie Murphy, who played on the White Mills team and was the recipient of the glass bat that you see upstairs in the museum. And here's the Erie Railroad Depot in White Mills. The first White Mills Depot was built in 1868 when the Jefferson branch of the Erie Railroad began service to White Mills. The original depot was destroyed by fire in 1888, and this photograph shows you the new White Mills Depot built in 1889. I don't believe it's a Hensel image, but we do have a very early stereopticon view of the original White Mills Depot with one of the early trains with the cow catchers and the big funnels at the White Mills station. Two of the more significant and probably more famous of the buildings in White Mills were the St. Charles Hotel and the Dorflinger family residence. So the St. Charles Hotel, that's the building on the left with the mansard roof, was built by Christian Dorflinger in 1868 to 1869 for visiting friends and business associates. An inaugural ball was held at the St. Charles Hotel on May 25th, 1870. Christian Dorflinger built the addition on the right, you see here, in 1872 as a permanent residence for the Dorflinger family in White Mills. And that's when the family moved from the farmhouse at the top of the hill, where the farm was located, down here to Charles Street in White Mills. The building is located at the bottom of Charles Street, and unfortunately both buildings were burned by the owner of the property on March 1st, 1961 to clear the site to build a new private home. And so you can see that new private home today, but you can also see the original stone and ironwork going back to the St. Charles Hotel days right along the lower part of Charles Street. This is a view of Main Street in White Mills looking east. So we're really at the edge of White Mills as you're coming from Honesdale toward the center of White Mills. And here you have a store on the left and then a series of houses as we go down the street. The sign in front of this store, again with the quality of the resolution we have in these digital scans, advertises Bamwell and Kimball Velvet ice cream for sale. So we can actually read that thanks to the digital scan. Here is a little closer view as we're moving down the street, again, of Main Street, looking down toward the center of White Mills. Two interesting buildings in this image. The first building on the right, this building here, was another hotel. That was the National Hotel, built by a man named William J. Smith. The second building on the right, Smith also built in 1897, and that was the White Mills Opera House, and also later known as the Florence Theater. So the theater became a popular venue for musical performances, plays, and community events. And those two buildings were located where the new White Mills Fire Department is located today. This is really the Main Street Business Center in White Mills. And the businesses that are pictured here on the left, you have P.J. Schmidt's Meat Market. Next to him, you have Skelly's Merchandise Store. Next to that building, the White Mills Post Office, and finally, the White Mills Hotel. The Meat Market originally was the first school in White Mills before the later brick school was built up on School Street. And then after the school, the front addition was added on to the building. Charles and Alex Laternus operated a glass etching business from 1923 to 1928 in that middle building, the building that originally housed the Skelly store. And now we're just looking at the same part of Main Street, but just looking the other direction. So we get a nice view on the corner of the White Mills Hotel. So this image would have been taken literally at the corner right out here of what is today Elizabeth Street and Route 6. And again, next to it, you have the post office, then the Skelly store, and then finally the Schmidt Meat Market right there as well. Right directly across the street from the White Mills Hotel, we have the original 1911 White Mills Firehouse, and next to it we have the White Mills Pharmacy, and next to that the doctor's office. And the first doctor in White Mills was Dr. Varney, Edward Varney, and so you can see those three additions, and then finally the Methodist Church right beyond the pharmacy and the doctor's office. The 1911 firehouse is now part of the Dorflinger-Sedam Wildlife Sanctuary, and in 1999. Wayne Stevens and the members of the White Mills Fire Department moved the firehouse across the street to the other side here, where it has its nice new home, and it is preserved and operated and maintained by the Dorflinger-Sedam Wildlife Sanctuary. So that's a quick view of the images that we have in the show. I would invite you to spend some more time looking at those images and seeing the quality and the detail that go back to the original work that Louis Hensel did and that have really kind of been brought to life by the work that Bob Lisa has done to do the scanning work on these images. As we think about next steps, we're beginning to plan for next year. Next year is the 100th anniversary of the dam and Lake Wallenpaupack, and so we thought that that was a good topic to take up next. And we're going to start to go through the slides and the images to see what we can do there to mount a similar exhibition next year, coinciding with the 100th anniversary of the construction of the dam as well. We've been getting a lot of requests about Hawley, so Hawley will be high on the list as well after that. But again, our plan is to select images, do the digital scans, and then begin to continue to mount exhibits as we go forward, highlighting this important collection and the work that we're able to do with it. And so with that, I thank you all very much. I'd be happy to answer questions. Otherwise, invite you to look at the exhibit. Yes.
A couple of questions. Were these pictures commissioned for Hensel? Was he commissioned to take these pictures, or did he do this on his own? Or?
I think most of it he did on his own. So some of them might have been commissioned work, but I think he did an awful lot on his own. And he ranged all across this area. He went as far as Nanticoke, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and then all of the area here down to Port Jervis as well. And think about for a lot of the work he did, starting in the late 1870s and then going up into the early 1900s, an awful lot of that was done with wagons before you had cars to move around. So, you know, and also this photography, I'm not an expert on photography, but this was not a simple, easy process. So you had to lug all of these glass slides. You had to treat them with the emulsions to record the images. You often had to fix the images in the field as well. And you had to do all of this by carrying it around with a wagon. And you're using a large square frame camera with a bellows that you had to adjust to make sure that you were getting a precise and very detailed image. And the quality of work that Hensel did is really, really remarkable. So, but my bet is he probably did some commission work, but especially for individual or specific buildings. But I think a lot of it was just the way he started. He did those original images, he marketed them, they were very popular, people wanted them, and he built a following that wanted to see those images. Awful lot of landscape photographs too. So the falls, the lakes, the ponds, a lot of that material has been recorded as well. So it's hard to imagine a more comprehensive set of images for this region of the country. It's really remarkable. Yes.
Jim, do you know what size glass plates he worked with normally?
Yeah, so most of them are about 4 by 6. But there are some bigger ones, and then there are some that are almost like 8 by 10 or 8 by 12. So there are a few of the bigger ones, but the vast majority of them are about 4 by 6. Yeah. Yes.
When you said that the early work was mostly stereopticons, cards, and postcards.
Or at least the things that have survived. Yes. Yeah.
Did he make his money? Is that how he...
I think that was also probably a very good source of revenue for him, because we find a lot of the stereopticon images and an awful lot of postcards that have, you know, Louis Hensel photographer on them. So I think that was also probably a very good source of revenue. So between the postcards, the stereopticon views, and then the larger photographic prints, and probably also the studio work. So if you think about commissioned work, the studio portraits were probably obviously all that. Yeah. Yes.
Did he take extensive notes in the field?
That's a good question. If he did, they weren't part of the Marshall collection, so that we don't have. So what we really have are the visual images. Now, thankfully, we do have a very detailed listing of what's being photographed. So at least we know what almost all of the images, what they're showing.
Did he document?
Yeah.
Did he wrote
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then some of them also have numbers on them as well that were put on the glass negatives. So those probably were for his inventory as well. Yeah. Yeah. But most of them, fortunately, are identified. And when it comes to ponds, that's probably a really good thing, because to my untrained eye, one pond tends to look a lot like like another one. So yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I have one question.
Yes.
Why did he move to Port Jervis? At age
I don't
17?
know. Yeah, I don't know
He's
what
in
the
New York.
connection was.
Why go to
Yeah,
Port Jervis?
yeah. There's, and I haven't found a lot of historical information about Hensel. There's the centennial publication in Hawley is probably the best resource, I think. And it has a nice description of Hensel and his life and his activities. And a lot of the material I talked about at the beginning came from that as well. The one thing I haven't looked at is his father's book. Now, his father, also named Louis, which adds to some confusion, was kind of a character, and he actually came with Louis Hensel to Port Jervis in the 1870s, and he listed his occupation in the census as actor. So kind of an interesting character. I don't know if there's anything in his book that talks about the journey to Port Jervis and how they found that area. Yeah.
He wrote a book about his life, is that?
His father did.
His father did.
Yeah. Was also named Louis. Yeah. One of the things we learned from that little stamp on the back of one of the stereopticons too is that there's an O in his formal name was Ludolf Hensel, and it's Loudolph. And a lot of us have had the Lu, Ludolf, Lu, rather than the O. But when we looked at his stamp, it's got the O, so now we know the right spelling for his first name. So, yeah. But he's always known as Louis. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the exhibit.